Alright, hey guys, King of Charmander here, and now the Mr. Rime data is in pvpoke.com and in GoHub. As you see here, the top, it's actually really cute. You know, you got the top hat, and if you actually look at the like suit, it looks like a clown. You know, like if you look at the like belly and everything like that. Like one of my friends pointed this to me, and I was like, what the? It is. If you see this, here's eyes, here's the nose, and it has a smiley face too. It's actually pretty creepy if I look at it from a standpoint. Anyways, Mr. Rime. Either most hyped or like most hated mod, not because it exists, but because of the way it's being implemented in the game. Mr. Rime, out of this time, you're going to have to pay for it to get it. Now the question is, and here is the master analysis of the Great League, Mr. Rime. Is it worth it to use Mr. Rime in Great League? So Mr. Rime is actually very interesting, and the reason why it's interesting is because of its unique moveset. However, let's go over everything else first. If you look at its stats, high attack, low defense, somewhat decent stamina. Unfortunately, because of this stat spread, it's not really a glass cannon, kinda, in a most sense. The really imbalance of attack, defense, and stamina, I would say it doesn't really overrate it as a confusion. As a confusion user, there are better options out there. However, Mr. Rime, like I said, it does have a unique moveset. As you see, high attack, somewhat decent stamina, but like low defense. So it's a very interesting mod. And its typing is what really limits it. Mr. Rime is just... oh my... This is why Mr. Rime is bad, or why Ice and Psychic is just such a bad archetype to have together. You have only 2 weaknesses, Ice and Psychic, and you have 6... I mean, you only have 2 resistances, Ice and Psychic. You have 6 weaknesses. You have 3 times more weaknesses than you do resistances. That's how bad this typing archetype is. You're actually better off just having Ice or Psychic on their own rather than having this combination. But that's why things like Jinx or Smoochum haven't really been featured in Go Battle League. Unless you're using them in a meme team or something like that. I actually had Smoochum featured in a video for J-Farm. You should check them out. They're really cool. If not, if you don't know already, John and Dustin are amazing. I love them both. And like I said, Smoochum and Jinx and Ice and Psychic, it's just a really bad type. As you see here, it's also kind of expensive to build. 75,000 dust for this thing, and it's kind of like, it's very sad. Yeah, it's very sad, unfortunately. So the thing is, what makes it really interesting, it has a very versatile moveset, which is why it's so sad that it's so weak to a lot of things. It has Ice Shard, Confusion, Zen Headbutt, Psychic, Ice Punch, Icy Wind, Psybeam. And because of that moveset, the fact that it has Ice Shard, Confusion, and Ice Punch and Icy Wind, this one move on its own makes it really interesting mod to play. And that's why when I first saw it, I was like, this is really interesting, until I saw the weaknesses. So it's going to be, obviously we're going to look at all the data, but from first look, Mr. Rime is not looking that good. You're not looking that, you, good sir, unfortunately, you die to a lot of things. Alright, here are the pvpoke.com analysis. Now, I don't want to hold your time or use less time as possible. As you see here, Mr. Rime barely makes the 69 score. It makes it for it to be the greatest Pokemon of all time. I'm just kidding. As you see here, Mr. Rime and even Galarian and Mr. Mime are barely better than its actual original cousin. As you see here, Mr. Rime is it's actually able to beat some interesting things. It's able to take on the Mud Boys. It takes out Shadow Victory Bell. We all love that it does this. Toxicroak and Azu. So it actually beats a lot of top meta picks. Now, its key losses are against, of course, G Stunfisk. Those Rock Slides are going to suck. Alolan Marowak burns you and melts you, sadly. Skarmory also really has a strong matchup against you because you resist those confusions. Now, ironically, even though you have Icy Wind, you still lose against Altaria because of the Dragon Breath. And remember I was talking about Hypno? You actually lose to Hypno. So, very good as a switch, and very bad in a closer, or actually it's just bad in all positions, but you know, it's best used as a lead if you're going to use it. It's going to be really interesting. Like I said, it does beat a lot of top meta picks, so it's going to be really interesting, like once we run the Matrix, just how does this actually fare? And how fast does it win, and how fast does it lose against top Go Battle Great League mons? Alright, if you would like to donate to ppocom.com, please consider doing so. It's an amazing open source resource, and the human being behind it is an amazing individual. We have Mr. Rime. Here we have Mr. Rime with Icy Wind and Psychic. You want to run this moveset because it gives you coverage, and Icy Wind does give you the debuff. As you see here, we have the Great League meta put out, and I'm going to hit battle, and we have Mr. Rime in the lead. Ironically, you're actually able to beat a lot of top picks. Now, as I mentioned, rocks kill ice. So if you see Bastion, you're probably going to lose. Anyways, here you go. You actually beat Azu in the 2-shield, and you beat Obama in the 2-shield. Ironically, you lose against Altari. I think if you have Ice Shard, you can actually, let's do that. As you see here, you actually beat Azu literally just straight Icy Wind. It's pretty nuts how much you beat it. So you could actually beat Azu with Mr. Rime. Now what we're going to do here is we're actually going to add Mr. Rime. Mr. Rime does have two things, so here's the... We'll do Mr. Rime, and then we'll actually give it Ice Shard. So we'll give it both Ice Shard, and we'll give it Psychic, just to, like, for science. We'll see what happens. Now, with the Ice Shard variation, you actually beat Altaria. You also beat Obama Snow still. You will lose against Azu, just because Azu does resist Ice Shard. You'll actually beat Chestnut with both variations, so both variations will actually beat Chestnut. You also beat Cresselia. You beat Dugong. You also beat Driplim with the Ice Shard variation. You lose against DD and also Diggersby. That's because of the fire punching, as well as DD does a lot of damage, and it's very tanky, and it does resist your confusions. However, in the 2-shield, you actually beat a few things. So you beat Frostless, you beat Galvantula and Haunter with the confusion variation. And ironically, you actually beat Hypno in the 2-shield if you have the Ice Shard variation. It's really weird. You win with the Ice Shard, you lose against the Shadow version though. You beat Lapras in the 2-shield. You'll beat Shadow Champ in the 2-shield because Confusion's chunk. You'll also be Mantine. Now you're gonna hard lose against Mandibuzz or any Dark type just because it does resist your Confusions. Alola Marowak of course melts you. Medicham does punch you to death, and unfortunately you don't have enough. Yeah, well, you win. Yeah, you win against Meganium with the Ice Shard. It's a really weird, and you lose against the majority of the rest of the meta. Melmetal, Mew, Obstagoon, Alolan Raichu. There's a lot of things that you beat a lot of interesting things, but you lose against a lot of things in the 2-shield. Now, interesting enough, if you do have the Icy... What is this madness? If you have the Ice Shard variant, you actually beat Shifter, you beat Skarmory, and Stunfisk. You actually beat G-Fisk in the 2-shield with the Ice Shard variation. What is this? What happens? Okay, so you just straight Icy. You literally... Wow, that's actually really interesting. So you actually beat Stunfisk, you beat G-Fisk with Ice Shard, just straight Icy Wind. That's pretty nuts. Well, yeah, that's pretty nuts. Yeah, I mean, you flip a lot of, so it's really weird. That's really interesting though, that you can beat G-Fisk with Mr. Rime and Ice Shard. You also beat a lot of top picks like Meganium, etc. You do beat Toxicroak and Swampert with Confusion, so in the 2-shield you can beat the Mud Boys, and Toxicroak with Ice Shard you do not. With Ice Shard, you actually beat Tropius, and you'll lose with it with Confusion. There's a lot of things that Ice Shard and Confusion flip. Basically, if you decide to choose Confusion, you beat, like, Fighters, etc., and Mud Boys. With the Ice Shard variant, you beat Flyers, Grass types, etc. You also beat Shadow Victor with Confusion user. Unfortunately, Ice Shard does not allow you to do so. And Wishcash, you beat it with both variations, and the Ice Shard one will beat Zweilous just because Dragon's weak to Ice. You do lose against Charmers, though, so it's actually really interesting. Which moveset you actually played, Mr. Rime, really does matter. Alright, so we did the 2-shield. Here's the 1-shield. In the 1-shield, what happens? So in the 1-shield, you actually beat all... So, if you have Confusion, beat Azu. If you have Ice Shard, you do not. You lose against Bastion, of course, in Charmers, so... It looks like the 1-shield is when you start losing a lot of viability, but in the 1-shield, you actually beat Diggersby with the Ice Shard variation and Drifblim. You beat Dugong with Confusion. You beat Cresselia with both. Chestnut's been a lot more popular lately, so... Confusion beats Haunter, of course, because you melt it. You beat Hypno, Shadow Hypno with the Ice Shard variation, and you beat Lapras, of course, with the Confusion one, and you still beat it with the Shadow Champ, of course. You're gonna lose against Manigans in both variations just because it's so tanky. You're able to beat Meganium and Medicham with Ice Shard. So you flip the two shield with Medicham, and you flip it in the one shield Now this is this is very close. So 504, you do beat it, but it's really close. You beat Manton with Confusion Variation, and it looks like you lose against the rest of the meta. So you lose against like pretty much a lot of Dark types, a lot of safe switches, Mew, Registeel. Oof, this thing, oh man, it's dangerous. This is where in the one shield you'll lose against G-Fisk. You'll beat regular G-Fisk, but regular Stunfisk, but you'll lose against the Burnt Pancake Variation. You'll beat Toxicroak because you delete it from the face of existence. Poison Frog does not like getting its mind read and just obliterated mentally, I suppose. I don't know how confusion works. You get very confused. Haha. You beat Tropius with both variations, and you beat the Razor Leaf one with the Ice Shard variation. It looks like fast move damage really does take out Mr. Rime. Fortunately, Umbreon does... It looks like Pokemon are really tanky to beat you, like Umbreon. You beat Venusaur and Shadow Victory Bell with Confusion. And you barely beat Vigoroth with the Icy Shard variation. And you lose against... So this is what you'll lose against. So it looks like you lose Zweilous against the 1s except the 2s. So you lose against a lot of things, but it does flip some very interesting matchups. Now we're going to go into zeros. I'm going to go to zeros here, and I'm going to go. So this is the closer. So in the closer, I can't imagine, because Mr. Rime isn't the thickest thing since sliced bread, it's probably going to die to a lot of things. You beat Altaria, you beat Abomasnow with both variations, however. You beat Chestnut with Ice Shard. This is where it gets iffy, the confusion. Unfortunately, it will take you out. Chestnut will beat you, unfortunately, compared to the other variations, because you won't be able to confusion it down. You do beat Clefable in the zeros. Do you beat Wigglytuff? You do! So you beat Clefable, and you can beat Wigglytuff in the zero shield, as long as you have confusion. You do beat it with it's a simultaneous knockout with the Ice Shard variation, but this is really if you have a little bit of chip damage on Wigglytuff, you can take it out. So it looks like in the closer it's really interesting. That's a lot of red. That's a lot of red. Yeah, that's a lot of red though. You lose against Lickitung, Lapras. There's no scenario where you beat Lapras in the closer now. Let's see, you beat Drifblim but with the Ice Shard variation, but you don't beat it with the Confusion variation. And you lose against a lot of things. You don't stand a chance against Cresselia, Deoxys defense anymore. Diggersby does dominantly beat you. So does Ferrothorn, Frostless, Galvantula, Haunter, Hypno. You lose against a lot of things. Let's just say that. Alola, Marowak. You do beat Medicham and Meganium with both versions, which is really interesting because they're both really relevant meta picks. Things like Registeel, Sableye, and Scrafty do annihilate you. And you do lose against G-Fisk. Depending on which variation you run, you will... beat Stunfisk with both, Swampert with both. You also beat Toxicroak with the Confusion variation, but you lose with Ice Shard. You beat both versions of Tropius, whether it be Razor Leaf or Air Slash. You lose against Umbreon and Venusaur, unfortunately, in the zeros. And it looks like this is where you can start beating things like Zweilous, Vigoroth, Wishcash. So you beat Victory Bell, Shadow Vic, Vigoroth, Wishcash with either variation. You beat Wigglytuff if you have Confusion, like I mentioned before, and you beat Zweilous if you have Ice Shard. So there's a lot of specific things that Mr. Rime flips, but it loses against a lot of against a lot of matchups. Like, yeah, it beats good matchups, but there's also a lot of matchups you just lose to in a lot of scenarios. It's hard to play. Alright, so that's the zero shield. Now, how about the ones? That's a closer. What about the one shield? Wow, no, actually not the one shield, but the one is zeros. Wow, if you're in the one is zeros, you actually beat a lot of things. You still lose against Bastiodon, Deoxys defense. You lose against Noodles, the bunny, which is Diggersby. Well, actually, more, it's like a rabbit, right? Yeah, Diggersby's a rabbit. It's like a rabbit. You beat Shadow Hypno with Ice Shard, but you lose against it. You also lose against Lickitung XL, unreasonably thick. Mandibuzz, of course, because it's a dark type, you do lose against... This is where things flip a lot. You beat Marowak if you have Confusion. You lose against it if you have the Ice Shard, because Ice resists Fire. Well, Fire resists Ice. I lied. That was the other way around. You lose against Melmetal and also Mew, Obstagoon, and Registeel. Now, you beat Sableye if you have Icy Wind. If you don't, if you have Confusion. Unfortunately, dark types destroy freaking Mr. Rime, and it doesn't seem to be any different. You beat Skarmory with Ice Shard. Wow, this is a lot of flipping. You beat Skarmory with Ice Shard, but you lose against it with Confusion. You also beat a lot of the other meta. Of course, Umbreon's a dark type, and you lose against it. You also beat Wigglytuff. Wow, this is a lot of specificity. You beat Wigglytuff if you have Confusion, but you lose if you have Ice Shard. With Zweilous, unfortunately, dark type Pokemon are very powerful, and Confusions do resist, so you lose against that. But guess what? If you turn it onto the next Ice Age, you actually beat Zweilous. which is pretty nuts. Alright, so that's the 1 to 0s. How about the 2 to 0s? Now, generally, anything up 2 shields is incredibly powerful. What do you still lose to? Alright. Oh, not this again. Okay, so you beat everything in the meta except Bastiodon. Bastiodon rocks your world. You lose against Mew if you have Confusion, and Sableye, but you beat both of them if you have Ice Shard. With that being said, you also beat Registeel. How do you beat Registeel when you have Confusion? Okay, I'm not gonna ask you any questions. You have 2 shields. Anyways, you lose with Ice Shard, but you beat it with Confusion. You beat Umbreon, then it's 2 to 0s as long as you have the Ice Shard, but you lose with Confusion variation. And with Wigglytuff, yeah. You can beat it with both, but then unless you have chip damage, you don't beat it with Ice Shard. And that's Mr. How about Shield Advantage? Okay. So it's promising. It's promising if you're in the 2 to 0s. It's promising. Wow, you lose against a lot of things, even in the 2 to 1s. You lose against Clefable, Bastiodon, Deoxys defense. You lose against Noodles. The Dark Bird that's really unreasonable to get in a 12k egg is actually you actually beat it unless you have Ice Shard. Ice Shard allows you to beat it. You beat Melmetal. You lose against Melmetal. You lose against Mewtwo unless you have Ice Shard. Registeel, Sableye. You beat Sableye as long as you have Ice Shard. Shiftry. You beat Shiftry as long as you have Ice Shard. You also beat G-Fisk in the 2 to 1s as well as you do in the 2 to 2s as long as you have the Ice Shard variation. Confusion does not, which is pretty interesting. As you see, Ice Shard flips more matchups in the 2 to 1s, but it's very specific and it's very hard to like play. It's really difficult. You do beat Altaria and Azu with either variation, so that's really interesting. You also beat Abomasnow and Chestnut. So you flip a lot of relevant meta matchups in the 2 to 1s with having shield advantage. Now, does that mean it makes you comfortable? No, because there's a lot of specific matchups you win or lose against depending on whether or not you have Ice Shard or if you have Confusion. But in the 2 to 1s, generally it looks like Ice Shard does more work. But you lose to Shadow Victory Bell in a 2 to 1, so I don't know if you're comfortable with that. But you do beat it with Confusion. This was one of the most painful analyses I've ever done in my entire career as an analyst. And just making these since I started when Go Battle League first came out. Anyways, Mr. Rime is a 6 out of 10. You really need to know what you're doing if you plan to use the Top Hat Ice tap dancing. You know, I'm normally known for hyping things up. I don't know how to hype this. It's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. It's not something that's going to oppress the meta. However, if you use it expertly and know what you're doing, you can actually take out a lot of the meta. As you see here, if you run into the 2 shield in the multi-battle, it actually beats 75% of the matchups. That's pretty good. The only problem is you get hard-walled by Bastiodon, and it's really dependent on whether or not you have Ice Shard or Confusion. Like, you're able to... It flips very specific matchups. Confusion flips 75%. Ice Shard actually does this. So if you do Ice Shard, you actually go up to 79%. See what I mean? Ice Shard or Confusion, it really depends on how you want to play Mr. Rime and what your coverage is. So it's a very specialized mon that has to be used expertly. Because after you lose 2 shields, as you see here, you lose over 50% of matchups. And then with Confusion, it doesn't get much better. You go from 49 to 42. It actually gets worse. So, Mr. Rime, once it loses 2 shields, becomes a very big liability unless it has shield advantage. If you have shield advantage, you can kind of make sure of things. However, Mr. Rime really needs 2 shields, or really needs shield advantage to be effective. Because of that, I can't give it a high rating. And depending on which moveset you run to, you'll win or lose matchups. So it's a very, very interesting mon. You need to know what you're doing with it, and it's just not as oppressive as something like Chestnut that just came out. Because Chestnut, as you see, yeah, you really need shield advantage, or you really need 2 shields for it to be very effective. Like, it's okay to 2 shield, but like, as you see here, once you drop 2 shields, you go down a lot. Unless you're in the 1 to 0s, unless you have shield advantage like I mentioned. Because Mr. Rime really needs shields to be effective, otherwise you lose against more than 50% of the meta, I can't give it a higher rating. Is it worth to go after for Great League? I don't really know, but it's really up to you. It's a very subpar... It looks good on paper just because of the movesets, but unfortunately, it's not good or great. It's okay, and if you really want to play it, you're going to have to really know what you're doing. If you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. Because Mr. Rime is such a conundrum and so interesting, I'm gonna do it. I will make videos for the rest of the leagues for Mr. Rime, except Master League because, well, actually, we'll do Master League just to like take a look at it for Master Premier, not anything else. Anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope your Go Battle League sets are going well, and I will see you on the next video.